Hey, Nancy, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
I discovered you like a year ago when you were doing some reason stuff on Antifa, and I totally want to get
Yeah.
into that. But you made an announcement today that you were just telling me about. What have you decided?
Well, I haven't been as panicky, I think throughout the pandemic. I basically, I traveled back and forth for Reason to Portland 5 times to report. So I've been on planes the whole time. I've been back and forth to Mexico twice in the past 2 months. And, I wore a mask and was precautionary, but I just felt like, you know, that sort of living your life throughout all this also sort of counts for something. There's a big chasm between, never leaving your house and spitting on people in Walmart. So I am one of those normal people. I just haven't been panicky about it. I've been tested a bunch. I've had my first shot, and I'm not wearing a mask anymore. I'm just not. I mean, I'm not going to make people super uncomfortable. I have no desire to do that. But I walked. I live in Chinatown. Went to lunch. Walked to the restaurant. Walked back. I just didn't. We ate outside. No,
Yeah,
done. Yeah. So.
yeah, I live on Capitol Hill, just a couple blocks from the Capitol, and the dogma with which people wear multiple masks while walking outside where there's plenty of room to socially distance. It strikes me that we've somehow passed the precaution and phase and gotten into some sort of religious thing or something, right?
Well, I think people let's first say there is conflicting information, and not everybody is like media heads like we are and thinking we're reading what is salient right now, and people are afraid, and then people also become quite wedded to the idea that they're doing the right thing, they're being the good people, and I understand that. But the fact is, it's all good news. As a friend of mine said on a podcast, have you heard the good news? It's like, yes. So let's go with that good news. And I mean, I think we really are. I think we're on the other side of things in a lot of ways. So could be
Yeah.
wrong.
The sort of dehumanization of it, and I want to move on to to other things, but I was thinking about this the other day, the way that we behave around each other. Um, it's almost as if everybody's the enemy because that person, you don't know what they've done or what they didn't do. Have they behaved responsibly? And I notice when you're walking past the street, other people that they don't look you in the eye anymore. There's no like human like, hey, how's it going, or a smile. And I worry about that. Like I feel like with all this other stuff going on, I feel like um, this this sort of culture of distrust is kind of a toxic and dangerous thing right now.
It's funny because I've had sort of the opposite experience. I've noticed it particularly in the past month. I tend to like to talk to people and say good morning and smile at people. And I've noticed, and of course, you can really only see people's eyes, right? But I've noticed that everybody is pretty communicative. They're like, you smile at them with your eyes, and they're like, they kind of want to be part of it too. So maybe we're coming out of that part too of being afraid and maybe distrustful. Like, where are you? Did you eat inside somewhere? So onward.
It's kind of funny. I'm an awkward, introverted libertarian, and I desperately want to be around people again. So it's time.
Come
It's
on.
totally time.
I
You're in New York City?
am. Yeah, I
Okay, and
am.
I read this piece that you wrote it in Tablet,
Uh,
Portlandization, which is I guess the next phase of Californication, where Californians came to Oregon and fucked up everything, and now and you wrote this piece, and I learned a lot about you. I've cyber stalked you for a couple hours this afternoon,
aw.
but it really it resonated with me. Like you spent a substantial amount of your life in Portland with your
Mhm.
husband,
Mhm.
and I want to get into that personal story about kind of what drove you back to New York City.
Mhm.
But I always used to tell all, and particularly my conservative friends would get freaked out about it. But Portland was always like my favorite place to hang out. I love the music scene and the beer scene and the food scene, and it's in one of the most beautiful places in the world. And like how do you screw that up? And I wasn't going as much by the time Antifa showed up, and I googled this. Apparently, they showed up in 2007, but like talk about the evolution of when you got there, and and what turned it into this swirling cesspool of violence and hate.
I will. The first thing I'll do. So that piece, which they called the Portlandization, it could happen to a city near you or your city. It was originally called Good Luck Portland because I was sort of ripping up my roots, and I lived there from 2004 to 2019. So that piece published in summer of 2019, and I actually just wrote. It's not the same kind of piece, but it's a big, long 5,000 word feature for a reason, which is in the May issue, which is called "The Dream of the '90s Died in Portland." So let's talk about what happened. So we moved up there in 2004. My husband was originally from there. We were living in LA, and this is a direct quote. He said, "Honey, it's not the horrible, depressing city it was when I grew up there in the '70s. You know, when there was like the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and his followers in their sunset-colored clothing, and people were junkies on the street, and it was quite beautiful. He brought me in May. It was Planet of the Plants. It was really beautiful. Now I'm a big city girl. I'm a New York City girl. Felt a little small to me, but you know what? We bought a house. He started a business. My daughter went to high school there, and it was, the city was growing. When we first got there, it was very, very Portland, Portland, Portland. Then all of a sudden, like 2009, you start hearing people speaking German or Japanese, and people were like coming from other parts because they're like, wow, interesting incubator here. It's beautiful. It's affordable. People are nice. I can start a business for like a tenth of the price it would cost me in Chicago. So I'm going to do it. And it also has this, it has this ethos like we're going to live green. It's a pretty progressive city, and I use that more in like the older fashioned sense of the world. It's very democratic, and this really spoke to a lot of young people. It's like, wow, I can go and create the world I want to live in. So a lot of young people came. So young people come, and a lot of them do really cool things. But what happens? Like you get a lot of big influx of people. Rents go up. Not as many jobs. Oh, but wait a minute. I thought I could just like work part-time as a barista and raise chickens and smoke pot and play in a band, and I'll have this great life and create this world. Well, what didn't kind of work out. I wrote a piece in 2010 for the Oregonian called "Is Portland the New Neverland?" Because people were coming here thinking that Portland was going to deliver their dreams. Well, by about 2015, it was pretty evident that was not going to happen. And I think you had a lot of slightly disillusioned, somewhat bitter people that were looking to make a better world. And God damn it, what's standing in my way? Well, you're going to strike out at the people that are closest to you. You're not going to strike out. I mean, they wanted to strike out at Donald Trump, but he's all the way in Washington. What are you going to, there's no satisfaction in just yelling at CNN, right? So it's like, maybe it's the police. Maybe it's your landlord. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's all these people that have power, and you should have power. And so it's sort of became an identity, right? The identity that we're going to make Portland a more beautiful, we're going to make it a more equitable place. We're going to fight for justice. Then you had Trump, and of course, everybody was losing their mind in Portland because they were so anti-Trump. And then you had the killing of George Floyd, and everything exploded. And the anger that had sort of been building for a long time, or resentment, whatever you want to call it, became an identity in and of itself. And we saw that play out. I mean, we're still seeing it play out. So that's the 5-cent version of what happened to Portland.
Yeah, and like in terms of the violence that really, I mean, at least nationally, we all started to notice it after Trump got elected. I think that culture, and certainly Antifa, precedes that significantly, but it didn't stop with the election of Joe Biden. You just wrote a piece, I think, for Reason, right, about the rage goes on.
Yes, I was there. So I covered the situation on the ground all summer and then through the fall for Reason. It was a great opportunity. I'm very grateful that they wanted me there. And before Biden was elected, people kept saying to me, okay, Nancy, what happens? What happens if Trump is reelected? And I was like, well, it'll put some more gas in their tank for sure, right? What happens is, are they going to be happy? Because, Biden's their guy. I'm like, you are high. Okay, if you think that these folks are like for the Democrats, they want no government. And I use that not because people have said that to me, and I shouldn't be glib when I say that. What they know how to do, and I've written this many times, they're like young and so much energy, and they love to tear shit up, man. It's like fucking stuff up is fun. First of all, it's COVID. You're not supposed to leave the house. Maybe you don't have a job. You're not in school. But you know what? You can go out every night, fuck shit up, and save the world, ostensibly. So that's what they did. So I actually was there for the election. And I went out the night after the election, and I was marching with a lot of the Black Bloc, which is, sort of the more violent arm of Antifa. Though really, Matt, I think a lot of these kids, they are LARPing, live action role playing. They're putting this stuff on. It's an opportunity to get outside. And it was so crazily violent. They would just march through downtown and, broke windows of literally this one store called Wild Fang, which specializes in like genderless clothing. And there's a slogan of Martin Luther King in the window, like you can only defeat hate with love or something like that. And they're just breaking the windows. Well, why? Because that's what they know how to do. They don't know how to build anything yet. They just know how to mess stuff up. And it was the first time that the governor, who had really wanted to blame all the violence on, it was the feds or it was right wingers. It's the first time the governor came out and said, we will not stand for this violence, left, right, or center. Because it is basically, the violence that we've seen on the streets for 200 nights running, now it's not every night, is from the left. People can fight me on this, but I'm sorry, I was there in the middle of it, and these are the Black Bloc kids that are setting the police stations on fire and breaking windows and walking past people's houses in the middle of the night with laser lights saying, get up, motherfucker, get up. These are not now. It's not that right-wing groups don't roll through town and they mix it up. They do. And that's a bit of, certainly to a liberal Portlander, it's a more scary thing because, these guys come, they're standing in the back of pickups, they're open carrying. They don't look like the characters out of Portlandia. Okay. And it's very easy to identify them, but they are not the people on the ground. They might be fighting Antifa sometimes, but they are not the people on the ground causing the violence. No way.
So like, a lot of us libertarians have made the distinction between sort of the founders and the ideology of Black Lives Matter Inc. versus people that are gathering and protesting for the righteous cause of race-based police violence, and it strikes me that there's two agendas there. One which is 100% laudable and reasonable, and the other which is radical and from my perspective dangerous. It sounds like from what you're saying that Antifa is the same thing, because there's this book, you've probably read it, called the Antifa Handbook by some professor, and I'll find his name in a second. But the Antifa Handbook and the history of Antifa is not just anti-fascist; it's explicitly Marxist. And it's not just a protest movement. It's sort of an explicitly violent strategy to disrupt the status quo in a way that would fit right into Marx's arc of history. Like they're trying to jar people out of their late stage capitalist mentality. But from what you saw on the ground, is the typical kid dressed in black smashing windows, is he ideologically motivated, or is he just part of a thing that gives his life purpose?
I think it's the latter, though, they are all sort of, dressing all in black and covering their identity. So I can't really say, who is more dedicated than another one. I will say, one thing that I found the more liberal media had a really hard time understanding was, you had at one point, like there was a march of 10,000 people in Portland a couple of days after George Floyd was killed. And these were what you would call peaceful protesters, no doubt. Families and kids and strollers and yes, please go out and do this. Absolutely. But what happened? They went home and you had, 100 or so, I wasn't actually there that night, that broke into the police station, set a fire, destroyed the furniture. People were locked in the basement, police employees. I wrote about a woman that was locked in the basement there. So it's like, but they were not allowed, the more liberal media was like, well, they didn't want to say that these people were violent or at all, because then they thought you were tarring the whole peaceful protest movement. I'm like, Why is it so hard to understand that you've got, 9,900 people that are peaceful and 100 that are not? But to kind of get back more specifically to your question, the people that were on the ground, when I started, they chant the Black Lives Matter slogans for sure, and they chant George Floyd's name, Breonna Taylor's name, much more toward the beginning. As the protests went on, there was less and less of that. It was more fuck the police. It was more, Ted Wheeler, wanted dead or alive. He's the mayor. They still sloganeer for Black Lives Matter because I think it gives them a little legitimacy or cover, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's because I haven't seen them build anything. I've only seen them break stuff. So I can't say, like, is this a political movement that has an agenda that they want to build something, or is it just kids that are getting identity from messing stuff up? If they would build something, then maybe we would know.
Yeah. Well, but part of Marxist theory, and you saw this in the incredibly deadly approach that, say, someone like Chairman Mao took during the Cultural Revolution, or certainly Pol Pot in Cambodia. There was sort of a method to their madness, because part of what they were doing was trying to break their culture's relationship with late stage capitalism, which meant that they killed a lot of people. Pol Pot killed the elites, he killed the academics, he forced people out of the cities into the country. And it, to an outsider that hasn't sort of read some of the more radical Marxist stuff, it seems like he must just be a monster. But in their mind, that there was a logic to it. We have to break it so that we can fix it. And I wonder if that's part of what's happening in Portland and frankly other cities. I have a friend who is trying to survive San Francisco in a place near Haight-Ashbury, and her theory is that they actually want to destroy the city so that the capitalists leave. Anybody that has a job or an income. And I hope that's not true, but I wonder if there's a method to the madness.
Well, I can tell you, I have a lot of friends in San Francisco that have left. Sometimes I didn't even know. They're just like, oh, we're living in Marin now. Like, they just sold their house. So, it's just like, we're done. We got little kids, and we're just not doing this anymore. I've been pretty, I don't know if it's critical of the press, but it's a really small contingent of people in Portland that are doing this, and they've been allowed to dominate the narrative because most people are like, they're taking the kids to the soccer game, or like they're going to work. We have not seen, they're not there. There's no mass killings in Portland yet, and I don't even know that would be. I mean, at this stage, thank God, that's not on the agenda. I do think they want to unseat the government for sure. They know, Ted Wheeler he's the mayor, used to be like their guy, right? Oh, they have no love for him or anyone on the city council. I think they do want to abolish city government, definitely want to get rid of the police. I mean, completely. Yeah, but again, it's a small group of people. Where it's going to go, I don't know, because the city and state governance has been really bad, has had a lot of failings, I think. And it's allowed this to carry on. One reason being is because they were so anti-Trump, and I am myself not pro-Trump at all, but to make it's like he was so gigantic in their minds that they had to do everything against him, right? So like the mayor's making these terrible decisions only because he thinks Trump would be making a different decision. And I think it's led Portland, and I say this in the piece in Reason, and it's going to be in the May issue. Where do you go from here when you've made so many terrible decisions for your city and continue to? How do you fix it? Who do you invite into the room? Who do you trust to invite into the room to help you fix it?
It's kind of, I mean, I have friends who still do business in Portland, Oregon, and they've tried to communicate with the mayor. And like I would imagine that there are people outside of his traditional, very progressive constituency. But like the mystery that you just described it, if it's such a small percentage of the population of the city, and I don't even imagine that a lot of these kids dressed in black actually vote. Why is Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, why is he held so hostage? Didn't he just survive a primary challenge by the Antifa candidate? What is he afraid of? And wouldn't he be more afraid that the entire business community is going to say, "Screw it, I'm out of here"?
I think Ted Wheeler painted himself into a corner. I covered a story for Reason in spring of 2019 when the city council was voting to pass a resolution to ban hate groups in the city. Now, on its face, that sounds fine. Like, great. Like, who's pro hate groups, right? But the problem is, who defines what a hate group is? You're in power right now, and so these people are the hate group. But now you're voted out, and now you've got this law in the books, and how are you going to use it? So they wouldn't define it, and it passed. It passed with flying colors. And I think it was because the more progressive elements wanted it, and he wanted to make them happy. But you can't make them happy. They are just by definition never going to be happy with well, first of all, progress doesn't stop, right? Even if it's devolution. And so he was their guy. He tried to make them happy, and now they're unhappy. But where does he go? He also has he hired a DA. This was actually kind of funny. So the DA that was existing was not supposed to leave until December, but there was an election and he lost to this young guy, Schmidt is his last name, I think. And the guy in July, the old DA said to him, "Ugh, it's going to be your problem. You take over now." So this DA walks in, and he basically decriminalizes any sort of violence you do in the course of protesting. So there's no consequences for people. They just break windows, they haul them in, they take them out, they haul them in, they take it out. It's like, what? They can't fix it. He surrounded himself by people that are not going to make a stand towards fixing anything. Not that I can see.
Yeah. Well, isn't Antifa, didn't they chase Wheeler out of his own apartment building?
Yes.
And talk about that tactic where they go around neighborhoods and shine lights and all that stuff.
So with Wheeler, that was, I think, September, August, something like that. They sat in front of his house, then they sat in his lobby. And I've had them, they've done this to me to intimidate me. They get in your face and they scream at you, blah, 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 blah. And they did it for several nights. They staged fires. Now, this is in the Pearl District. The Pearl District is like the nice, Tony little area near downtown. He was in a $900,000 condo. And they set fires in the street and they danced around it. And he decided to move out because he didn't want to annoy his neighbors anymore. Well, that was considerate, except you're the fucking mayor. Okay? How is this leadership to say, okay, I'll move out of my condo? So he did. I was actually in Portland, I think, if not the first night, one of the first nights. You have to escalate the tactics. You don't just do the same thing every night. Though, my God, it's so boring. I'm like, guys, kids, can you get some new moves? It's like, bust a window, set a fire. It's like, God, aren't you bored yet? But I was with them one of the nights. They're marching through the streets. It wasn't actually that late. It was like 9 o'clock, but it was dark. And they're marching through the streets. And it's weird because it's dark, it's unlit, it's residential. They're all in black. They almost look like a bunch of like a little army, right? And they were not making much noise. And there are people on they're clapping for them on their stoop with their little kids, because they want to support the young people, right? And as this is happening, somebody shouts to them, "This used to be a black neighborhood, gentrifier, pants on fire, blah, whatever." And the people are just like, Well, then it escalated from there. You shine lights at midnight and you shout, "What a shout, get up, motherfucker, get up." And I asked one of the women, a lot of women, this movement, I would say maybe more women than men, or definitely equal number. And I was like, "What do you actually expect them to get up and march with you?" She's like, no. They're living their comfortable lives. And they have to understand that there are people that are not comfortable and we want to make them uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, great. What? So, yeah, that was not, and I'll tell a little story that I've told before. So when I was living there in 2019, I had my daughter's dad was living with my husband and me. He had stage 4 cancer. He was dying. He did die. And I got to tell you, if they had come and shown lights in his window at midnight shouting that, I would not have been too happy about that. But, people are scared. They're intimidated. Of course they are. You've got 600 people in black helmets screaming at you. You know, some people will get up in their faces. Not many. Not many. They're intimidated, and I've talked to a lot of people who are like, "Well, I didn't want to say anything. I don't support this, but I know if I say something, I'm going to get, holy hell rain down on me from my neighbors, or maybe they're going to come back, maybe they're going to come to my house." And so people don't say anything. But I don't know. I don't know how long people are going to put up with. I mean, people have left. I have a friend there who's an entrepreneur. She's opened a bunch of businesses, and she said, Nancy, we're losing our intellectual capital. People are just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
She's like, you left. I'm like, yeah. My husband closed his business. He's not there anymore. Just gone. Like, I don't want to. This is not the environment I feel like we can do our best work in. So bye.
Talk about and I think it's related because it's this culture of intolerance that you describe in your piece about how that evolved in Portland. But if you would tell the story about how your work made your husband's business a target, because
Yeah.
I think that helps explain why people won't speak up, because it's dangerous to your livelihood. It might actually be dangerous to your person to push back.
Yeah. So, uh, late 2018, early 2019, I had a podcast that only lasted for 5 episodes with a gal named Leah McSweeney. She's now a Real Housewife of New York, which is hilarious. But she was a journalist at the time, had a sports a clothing company, and we had a little podcast, hashtag Me Neither, which Matt Welch named, so he gets all the blame credit. And we talked about trying
He's a
to.
monster. He's a monster.
He's just a monster. Anyway, we talked about trying to have some clarity. Me Too was raging, and we are like, look, for anything, for the good that is coming out, you also have the bad. I mean, this is inevitable with anything, right? Like you could have great frozen yogurt and shitty frozen yogurt. It's just inevitable. And we wanted to try to say, look, there's a difference between a Harvey Weinstein, or not even Harvey Weinstein, with an R. Kelly and an Aziz Ansari. And if you don't see that, you are not ever going to solve anything. So we talked about that. We talked about the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. We talked about, how we'd both been victims of sexual assault. It's like, how long do you carry this around? How long do you let it define you? We talked about the rod at the top of the Women's March. They were anti-Semitic, and like we were talking about things that I don't think it's so unusual, but maybe it wasn't popular. Let's put it that way. Okay, but we were having fun. We videoed it. We were both girls flipping our hair around, just being goofballs. And a former employee, manager of my husband's business, he was a coffee roaster and had a bunch of cafes. She had been the hiring manager, and she was kind of like a mother hen to a lot of employees, but she left not under great circumstances. She and my husband didn't get along anymore. She decided that my podcast put the employees of Ristretto Roasters, that was the company, in physical danger. And she got some former and I guess current staff to sign a letter claiming they felt this way and unsafe, and by extension the community of Portland was unsafe, and they sent it to the media, and the Portland media, they ate it up like creme brulee, baby. It was like, absolutely, look at the monstrous people. Meanwhile, I'm going to plug my book, To the Bridge, A True Story of Motherhood and Murder. It had come out 6 months before. I'd been on the covers of all the magazines. I'd been, like I was known. Well, that's fun. You don't bring down people that are like Joe Schmo, right? You want to have some fun with this, I guess. Anyway, people, all the wholesale customers fled. People didn't come to the cafes. The employees all quit. I had to work the cash register with my husband, which is like, what? Just to sort of, and he was baristaing, which he hadn't done in, since he'd opened the business 10 years before. And basically just attrition, closed most of the cafes, had one cafe left open, still did the coffee, had one employee, from 35 employees to one employee, his nephew. And then the last cafe closed during COVID because it was in an office building. And basically he shut down the business for good in November, and we sold our house and we're out. And yeah, I during that time, so when it's obviously a scary thing, it's and I, he had nothing to do with it. It was like, and the funny thing, well, not funny, it was like he had all these people. It's like, you better leave your fucking wife or lose your business. Like, oh, nice feminists here, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but I, about 6 days into the barrel, I get an email from a woman, and she said, "Hi, Nancy. My name is Heather Hying. You don't know me, But my husband, Brett Weinstein, and I have sort of gone through in a different context what you have. I'm living here in Portland. I'd like to extend my hands. I don't want to start crying now, but I'm going to. I'm like, actually, Heather, I do know who you are. I know exactly who you are. And we met, and she told me what was going to happen. Everything she said was going to happen happened. And she said something I've repeated many times. And I think that people watching this can remember it for when it happens to them or to be a better citizen. She said, when these things happen, a few people stand by you publicly. Matt Welch was one that did. Heather was, Barry Weiss, my friends. A few more privately, and the bulk of people sit on the fence and wait to see which way the wind blows. So if I could just say, like, we also, though, amazingly, you meet the most incredible people who you've never met, who like hold out their hands to you and bring you meatloaf and bourbon, and like they are like, we are here. And this is something I think it's a good thing to do for people in general. Like it's a tough thing. Don't worry. You think I think people think your shame is going to splash onto them, and maybe it will. But you know what? It also won't if we just say no. No, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm gonna do a better job. So that's the story.
Yeah, and the accusation was boiled down, and this is definitely what happened to Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein. Is the accusation was that since you weren't 100% with them, you were, in this case, rape culture, or however
Yes,
they would say that.
culture apologist. Which, you know, what's really funny, Matt? I realize what they hit you with is always stuff that would make you upset because you know it's not true, like Brett and racism, me and being like anti-women, like or pro-rape, like because they can't accuse you of like, oh, you're not a good javelin thrower. I'd be like, yeah, you're right. Like I'm not. Like who cares?
Yeah.
They hit you where it hurts, and they hit you where it's going to get the most attention. And look, I can't tell you if there was a percentage of people that were actually frightened of me. I would think that would be pretty absurd, but what do I know?
And the accusation in the streets is if you're not with Antifa, you must be a fascist. And there's no middle
Absolutely.
ground there. You're either a fascist or, and what they're not saying is you're either a fascist or you're a Marxist, but it's always that black and white, us versus them kind of thing.
Yeah, I was called a fash for sure. You're a fash. I'm like, I am. No, I'm not. I'm just a journalist, you know. Um, yeah, I mean, I find this so reductive and stupid. It's like you don't know me, and if I mean, I will say what something I've also said before, like one on one. I've had a lot of conversations with the Patriot Prayer guys. They're like a pro-Trump or right-wing group from Vancouver. I've had Antifa girls wash the tear gas out of my eyes. I think it was a Proud Boy did the same. I mean, no, Patriot Prayer guy did the same thing. One-on-one, all put on our pants, one leg at a time. Most people will sit and have a conversation with you, which is, of course, the only way. It's kind of why we're here. Like the only way we move forward at all. But as a group, yeah, they're just going to paint you because Matt, they need enemies. That's how they get their calories. That's how they get their energy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they need enemies. They need to make more and more enemies, which is why we see more and more like, oh, you're not, whatever it is today. You be accused of this. It's Dr. Seuss now, right? Because we've got to find more and more things to be angry about to sustain our momentum in this movement.
Yeah, and if they don't have a real enemy, they create one. That
Sure.
I think that was Leninism 101, and I'm not talking about John. Um, so you mentioned this, and I want to go back to it. You've been reporting on Antifa, and did they know who you were? And so did they target you in rallies like they targeted Andy No?
Not as much. I'm not, he's public enemy number one there in Portland. But he's also, he's made Antifa his public enemy number one. So, it's a mutual sort of antagonism. I basically, I'm there with a pad and a tape recorder or my phone, but they do know who I was. They knew who I was because they knew me from the whole thing with my husband. And
Yeah.
I have pink hair or blue hair, whatever color it was. And yeah, I had my phone stolen. I got screamed in my face. I had a guy say he was going to beat the shit out of me with a bat. Um, they kind of like shadow you sometimes. They put my picture online, which is hilarious. They're always like, you can't, photography equals death. You can't take any pictures. And I'm like, then they're putting my picture online. I'm like, gee, one of the other guys, like, what's it going to be? But you know what? I got to tell you, I never felt scared because most of these people, the guy that said he was going to hit me with the metal baton was not pleasant, but I don't think he was really I think he was just a wingnut. I was never scared. I'm like, what are you going to do? You going to kill me? No, you're not going to. And really, one-on-one, they're not very courageous people, not in my experience. And that's okay. And actually, I had a long conversation. She actually did talk on the record. Super nice girl, works as a dog walker, like she's like nice, like they will talk to you. But yeah, in a group, they like to see if they can intimidate you. I wasn't intimidated. Sorry.
Yeah, I always wondered, and I asked one of my progressive friends about this, maybe on this show or some other show, like, how courageous can you be if you're wearing a mask to a protest? This is not Hong Kong. You don't have the central government sweeping you up and taking you to re-education camps. You're hiding your face because you're afraid, and you're sort of hiding in this uniform that everyone looks the same. It seems like a very tribal but cowardly sort of community.
I think there's a real correlation between, staying anonymous online, right? The things that people have said, I'm sure to you, and they've said to me, are sometimes beyond grotesque. They wouldn't do it with their name attached. And I think that if you're showing your face, you're not going to be smashing things the way you do when you can do it anonymously. I do wonder, you're drawing a lot of correlations between, Pol Pot and, Stalin and stuff. I have not read as deeply as you have for sure, but I wonder if the sort of, this younger internet generation who grew up with anonymity and saying, smearing people online, if it's very easy for them to fall into the it's what they do anyway, to
Yeah,
fall into the costume.
interesting. I'm afraid that might be true, and it kind of gets back to, like, I've been sort of a um, pretty radical in opposition to lockdowns, even early on, because of the unintended consequences of all this. But one that I didn't really imagine, because I never imagined that lockdowns would go on this long, is the dehumanization of this whole process. Like, we're locked in our homes, and we're getting more and more angry, and we hide our faces, and we judge people even though we have no idea if they did anything wrong. And that, on top of that sort of anonymous culture, like, you say things to people online that you would never say to them
Never.
to their face. It's sort of like driving in your car and the guy cuts you off, and the things that you say about that guy are not something that you would ever say to him if you
right.
were actually looking him in the eye. And the dehumanization, going back to Pol Pot and Mao and Stalin, like, dehumanization is a key part of how authoritarians do this stuff to otherwise decent people. And I worry about it. I don't like drawing analogies to mass murderers, but I worry about where we're headed with this stuff.
Well, I do. I'm sorry to plug it for the third time, but I am pleased with how the piece came out, the new piece in Reason about Portland. And one thing I say at the end, and it really is kind of heartbreaking. They've become mesmerized by the nihilistic fire, and these are young people, and it's like, young people, please go make out. Go, whatever, go fuck around, go dance. And maybe it's because they didn't have these opportunities, like you're saying, like this lockdown. You can't go out, you can't go to a movie, you can't, I don't know, have sex with someone you never met, or whatever it is that you want to say. The joy, the allowable joys got sapped, and so they had to find another thing. But do not let yourself be mesmerized by that nihilistic fire. This is a bad idea. You've got to look toward the light, and for some sort of hope and glow. And I almost, I see them robbing themselves of hope. There's no, I mean, all it is about destruction. Fuck the police. Kill Ted Wheeler. They don't say that, but they say fuck him, and they've got, wanted dead or alive posters, and they say that they're fighting for justice, but what is justice? What are they fighting for? Do you know?
No idea. No idea.
And they're very young too. Oh man, Matt. I mean, some of these they're so young. These two kids that screamed in my face, photography equals death. And I was like, oh, hold on. Hi guys. I wanna unpack this with you. So what do you mean by that? No, just tell me like and they just walked away. They don't they know a slogan, and that is as far as they can go. And that's just like, oh guys, just like, I don't know, go home, make some cookies, go watch TV, do something else, because this is not, I don't know how it's enriching them. I don't think it is. I'm sure I would love to talk to somebody that could say to me, it is enriching me, and here's why, and here where I think we're getting, and here's how I think it's going to be positive for not just me and my ilk, but for the community and for the world at large. I would love to have that conversation.
So what's so like you've written about this and has this recent piece come out yet? I don't know when the May issue comes
No,
out.
it'll be online, and think in about a week or two.
Okay.
And it's in a way, it's sort of like the piece you started out with, the tablet piece, but updated to include, everything that's happened. And because things have happened, Portland has evolved pretty fast since 2019. The city is not looking good. The city, I mean, the homelessness and the encampments and the destruction downtown and the business that closed during COVID and the constant destruction, like physical destruction, if not every night now, but it's the city does not look you started this by saying it's such a beautiful city. Right now it's not all of it. It's still, Portland, planet of the plants, but a lot of it is not beautiful anymore.
Yeah, I was there in December and I went to the war zone and it's not beautiful anymore.
Mm-mm.
I would always go out of my way to stay. In fact, I was at that shop that you described getting smashed when I was there in December, I think. And I used to stay at the Ace Hotel all the
Yep.
time, and
Yep.
I just love the whole scene. And
Yep.
I won't go there anymore. If I have to go to Portland on business, I'll do my business, and then I'll stay out in the country somewhere because it's not worth it.
No, and let's see when it will be. I mean, I don't know who wants to live in ugliness, who wants to live in broken glass. I mean, if that's a reflection of what they're feeling inside, that's pretty sad, you
Yeah.
know? So,
But I'm hoping that so you've told us this devastatingly dark evolution from beautiful Portland to Portlandia to hellhole.
yeah.
I guess we're not allowed to say shithole anymore. But
He
uh,
ruined that
what's
phrase for us.
what's the solution? Like how do we keep how do I can't say my town because I live in Washington D.C. and I'm actually almost literally surrounded by barbed wire right now. So
Oh man.
but what should we do? I mean, one thing is to engage young people, I think, with ideas and values and hope. But what can we do to stop this from happening to all of our cities?
Well, I do a every Monday 5 p.m. Eastern time. I host a clubhouse with a couple of other journalists. It was a pretty with Katie Herzog last night and Lizzie Wolf from Reason. And one of the questions we got was, where do you all think we are in the evolution, if you want to call it cancel culture? Where, like, are we beginning, middle, or end? And I think that, and I am gonna draw a parallel with Portland. Um, but I invite your peoples to the clubhouse. Come join us. I think we're in the middle, going through a little more. And what I think the solution is not just to create organizations where you're going to fight it. It's to create new beauty, to create things that are like, okay, I could like be a canceler, or I could fight cancel culture, or I can go over here and make a pie. And like maybe some people are going to be like, oh, look, pie. That's the name of my Substack, Make More Pie. So you can go over there too. So in terms of Portland, what could happen? Well, I think people, if there were other things to do, I think they'd get tired of coming out every night. Be like, I want to stay home and watch Netflix and chill. I want to, school's back in session, or I've got another job. So maybe some people that didn't have things to do, now that COVID is opening up, maybe they'll absorb back into where they were. I also think that, probably every city in the history of cities has had a rise and a fall and a rise and a fall. Sure, we've had destruction. Businesses have left. Things have closed. But inevitably, spring will come again, and it will be a new city built, now maybe it's going to be affordable again. So you're going to have a whole wave of people that are going to come in and say, oh, I can do what people were doing in 2004. I'm the eternal optimist. So I think that that's inevitable. How long it takes, I don't know. And I'm not going to be there to be part of it. We sold our house. So
Yeah. So I'm told that Zoomers are sort of the um, counter revolution in cancel culture. I hope that's true. And it sort of makes sense that whatever the older generation is doing, you might do the opposite. But sort of the authoritarianism and intolerance of cancel culture, it strikes me that places like Clubhouse, I've spent some time on Clubhouse too, and it's it is a place where you actually have to speak to people,
yep,
and you're supposed to use your real name.
you're not
And
anonymous.
yeah, you're not anonymous, and you're having a conversation. And I've always been sort of a romantic about social media, and I've been proven horribly wrong in the last couple of years. But it strikes me that the counter revolution is long form conversation and curiosity and a not only a tolerance but an excitement about hearing people
Yep.
from different perspectives. And I think we're both working towards that and hoping that that's true. And I gotta believe that my 16-year-old self would hate cancel culture with a burning passion because that's who 16-year-olds are.
Yeah. I think we are, Clubhouse, which I really wasn't very interested in until about a month ago when I joined, and now I really only go on it when I'm kind of running something. I've popped in a few times, but it's very intimate. The voices are intimate, and you're really sort of thinking, and you have to like wait your turn. And we've created, for all the horrors of COVID, we've created new mediums in which to communicate, whether it's Clubhouse or Substack or Matt Welch, horrible monster Matt Welch, and I built a little studio, Paloma Media. We're podcasting out of there with the Fifth Column guys, and it's like it's fun. And I think I know people are angry, they want to break shit, but people really also want to have fun, and so let's give them some fun, and it can't hurt.
Let's if you're up for it, let's do a Clubhouse sometime on
Let's
these
do it.
subjects.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Um,
Yeah.
we
I'm on
created
there.
something called Club Liberty, and I'm hoping that my whole goal is to just platform as many interesting people as possible and have voices and create sort of environment. Lead by example, I guess, is how I think about it. Just show your willingness to talk to people from different perspectives, and maybe other people will say, "Oh, that's actually kind of cool. I want to do that now too." So I'm hoping that Clubhouse becomes that. It kind of is now, and I hope it doesn't become another place where everyone cancels everybody else.
Well, it is. They're calling out people. It's inevitable. It'll be a cycle. But then we'll build something else, and then we just keep, you know, yeah, I think it'll be fine for a while. Yes.
Okay, so do some blatant self-promotion here. You mentioned one of your books, but you said it so fast, I don't think anyone heard it. So
Sure.
tell me about where we get more Nancy.
More Nancy. Well, my website is
24/7.
24/7, man. I got a lot of platforms these days. So Nancy Rom, NancyRomm on Twitter, or that's also my website. My book is called To the Bridge, A True Story of Motherhood and Murder, about a woman that threw her two young children off a bridge in Portland, Oregon. It is not a sensational book. It is a book about trying to understand what people say is not understandable. I don't accept that. I think that we can look at these things that are hard and learn some things. At Paloma Media, also on Twitter, and we've got a YouTube channel. Matt and I are putting up some work there. I've got a Substack, put my name into Substack, and Clubhouse, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. So yeah, and I'm writing for Newsweek, the Dispatch, Reason, the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, I'm easy to find. Matt, if anyone says they can't find me, they are not looking.
Yeah.
So,
So, how do you do all that, by the way? I need some lessons on how to be that
Well,
productive.
so my life has changed radically. Like I lived with a husband and family and a million people in and out of the house. I'm living by myself in Chinatown right now. So I've got time to work. And I love what I'm writing about. I mean, Catherine Mangu Ward, the editor-in-chief of Reason, when I texted her on a Sunday morning and said, I want to get out to Portland for you. She said, go. I mean, people are, covering the Portland story. I've been covering the Donald McNeil Jr. story at the New York Times. I'm just I'm very fortunate that people want me to write for them, and I'm just doing it.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this, and then
Thank you.
let's do more stuff.
Sounds great. Okay. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
That was amazing. Where can I get more content just like that? It's a great question. You're clearly a discerning consumer of the best content. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and click the bell. And if you're consuming podcasts, go to Apple, Stitcher, anywhere you get them. I'm in. Kibbe on Liberty, honest conversations with interesting people.